The rain had been falling since morning, a soft drizzle that clung to the windows of my small, dimly lit room. I sat by the window, clutching my shawl closer to my shoulders, my eyes wandering to the old leather suitcase resting near the door. It was worn and frayed, its edges cracked, but it carried within it my most precious belongings: an old photo album, a neatly folded sweater I had knitted for my granddaughter, and a letter I had written for my son. The suitcase was not heavy with things, but heavy with hope. That morning, I had been told by my son that they would meet me at the train station. "Don't worry, Mama," he had said in a hurried voice over the phone. "We'll be there to take you home." His words still echoed inside me like a gentle promise, and I held them close, even as doubts crept into my heart. I dressed slowly, my hands trembling as I buttoned the faded cardigan that had been my husband's favorite on me. I wanted to look presentable, wanted my children to see me and remember that I was still their mother, still the woman who once carried them in her arms and stayed up all night when fever burned their little bodies. My hair, though silver and thinning, I combed neatly and tied into a bun. I pinned a little rose-shaped brooch on my cardigan, the one my late husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. It was my way of carrying him with me as I went to meet the family we had built together. The walk to the train station was not far, but each step seemed heavier than the last. My cane tapped the ground softly, and the damp air filled my lungs with a mix of coldness and longing. I watched children run past me, their laughter spilling onto the street, and for a fleeting moment, I remembered my own children running ahead of me, looking back with toothy grins and bright eyes. I whispered to myself, "They will come. They will not forget me." When I reached the train station, the platform was crowded with people rushing, hugging, saying their goodbyes, and greeting loved ones. I found a wooden bench near the corner, sat down carefully, and placed my suitcase by my feet. My heart beat a little faster each time a new train arrived. My eyes searched the crowd, scanning for the familiar ones I had known for decades: my son's sharp jawline, my daughter's long hair, my grandson's wide eyes. Hours passed. I watched the crowd thin and swell again, watched strangers reunite in warm embraces, watched children leap into their parents' arms, but no one came for me. My hands began to tremble as I opened my handbag and pulled out a small packet of biscuits I had brought. I nibbled on one quietly, more to fight the ache in my stomach than to enjoy the taste. The biscuit was dry, crumbling into my mouth, but the tears that gathered at the corner of my eyes made it salty. I told myself perhaps they were delayed. Perhaps the traffic was heavy. Perhaps my son's phone had run out of charge. I believed in those excuses because the alternative, that they had chosen not to come, was too painful to accept. As the afternoon slipped into evening, the golden light of the sun stretched across the platform, painting long shadows. I tightened my shawl around me and whispered a prayer under my breath. "God, please let them come. Please let me see them one more time." My voice was drowned by the whistle of another departing train. Still, I waited. My body ached from sitting too long, my feet stiff from the cold. Yet I stayed on that bench, staring at the crowd, refusing to leave, because leaving meant accepting abandonment. A small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed at me. "Why is that grandma sitting alone with a suitcase?" he asked. The mother hushed him gently and pulled him away. They didn't know that in my heart I was screaming for someone to notice, for someone to call my name. The lamps flickered on as night approached. The crowd thinned, the voices softened, and the platform grew quiet, except for the rustle of newspapers and the occasional footsteps. I leaned back against the bench, my chest heavy. Memories flooded me. Nights when I stayed awake nursing my son's fever, mornings when I braided my daughter's hair, afternoons when my husband and I laughed over nothing. I thought of the sacrifices, the meals I had skipped so they could eat, the long hours of stitching clothes so they could wear something new. I thought of love that had once bound us like threads, and I wondered where those threads had gone. My suitcase sat silently at my feet, but inside it, the sweater I had knitted for my granddaughter seemed to pulse with life. I imagined her wearing it, her little arms wrapped around me in gratitude. I imagined my son smiling, saying, "Mama, you're home now." But imagination was all I had. As the last train departed, the emptiness of the station mirrored the emptiness inside me. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maybe tomorrow." And with that fragile hope, I clutched my shawl tighter, refusing to let the tears fall because I still believed, still wanted to believe, that my family had not abandoned me completely. But deep inside, under the layers of denial and hope, I already felt the cold truth settling in. I was waiting for a family that might never return.
The night at the station had been long, yet sleep never touched my eyes. I sat with my shawl pulled tight, my suitcase beside me, and my heart heavy with questions. The lamps above flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch across the empty platform like silent companions to my loneliness. I had always been afraid of silence, for it had a way of forcing the truth into the open. And that night, the silence whispered to me again and again, "They are not coming." I tried to silence that voice by remembering better days. The days when my house was filled with noise, the clatter of dishes, the playful arguments of my children, the voice of my husband humming his favorite tune as he read the newspaper by the window. I remembered Sundays when I cooked their favorite meals and everyone gathered around the table, their laughter echoing through the house like music. Those were the days when I felt needed, when every wrinkle on my hands was a badge of love, when every sleepless night spent caring for them seemed worth it. But the years had changed everything. One by one, they had drifted away. My daughter married and moved across the ocean, promising to call every week. For the first few months, she did, her voice bubbling with stories of her new life. But gradually, the calls grew shorter, and then fewer, until silence swallowed even that bond. My son stayed closer, but his heart was elsewhere. He had his own life, his own family, his own priorities, and somewhere along the way, I had slipped from being his anchor to being his burden. That night, as the clock struck midnight, I thought of my husband, how I wished he were still here. He would have known what to say, how to ease this hollow ache in my chest. I closed my eyes and imagined him sitting beside me, his hand covering mine, his voice steady. "Serafina, you are not alone. As long as I am here, you will never be alone." But when I opened my eyes, there was only emptiness, only the echo of memories too fragile to hold. The station guard walked past me and paused. "Are you waiting for someone, Amma?" he asked gently, his voice tinged with pity. "Yes," I whispered, my throat tight. "My family, they were supposed to come." He nodded slowly, but his eyes said what his mouth did not, that he had seen too many like me, waiting for too long, waiting for people who never arrived. He walked away, leaving me with the sting of truth pressing harder against my chest. When dawn broke, the station came alive again. Vendors shouted, trains roared in and out, and families reunited with joyful embraces. I stayed on the bench, my suitcase still at my feet, my hope fragile but not yet broken. Perhaps they hadn't come last night, but maybe they would come today. Maybe they had been delayed. Maybe something happened. Maybe. I watched a young woman arrive with her mother. She held her hand tightly, guiding her gently through the crowd. The older woman's steps were slow, her hair silver like mine, but her daughter stayed close, never letting go. I turned away quickly because the sight was too much to bear. My own daughter had once held my hand like that, her little fingers clutching mine as though she were my whole world. When did I stop being her world? When did I become just another voice she no longer had time to hear? By afternoon, hunger gnawed at me again. I had a little money in my handbag, enough to buy a cup of tea and a piece of bread. The vendor gave me a curious look as I paid him, as if wondering why an old woman was sitting alone with a suitcase, staring at every arriving train. I didn't tell him my story. Some pains are too heavy to explain, and some silences speak louder than words. As I sipped the tea, I remembered a summer long ago. My son was 10, and he wanted to ride the train for the first time. He begged and begged until finally my husband and I agreed. I still remember the excitement on his face, the way his eyes sparkled as the train whistled. He had pressed his nose to the window, pointing at everything he saw, his laughter filling the compartment. "When I grow up, Mama, I'll take you everywhere by train. You'll never travel alone." That memory cut into me like glass. Where was that boy now, the one who once clung to my hand, who once swore I would never be alone? The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Another day was ending, and still no one came. I leaned back, weary, and felt the weight of my age pressing down on me. My body was frail, but my hope was stubborn. Even as the tears slipped silently down my cheeks, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, tomorrow they will come." But deep inside, I knew I was clinging to a thread that was already breaking. The third night at the station was colder than the last. The wooden bench beneath me had become my bed. My pillow, a folded shawl. My blanket, the thin layer of hope I refused to abandon. Each whistle of the train jolted me awake, and my eyes searched desperately through the blur of strangers. Every time a family stepped off, my heart leapt and then fell again, like a bird beating its wings against a locked cage. I began to realize that perhaps I was not waiting for their arrival anymore, but rather for the courage to accept that they would never come. But courage had never been easy for me, especially when it came to matters of the heart. My love for my children was not a rope I could cut. It was a chain forged into my very soul. As the hours stretched, my mind wandered back to the days of sacrifice. I saw myself, young and strong, carrying baskets of laundry on my head, sewing clothes late into the night, selling my gold bangles one by one so there would be enough food on the table and books for their schooling. I remembered watching them eat while I kept my hunger hidden behind a smile. I remembered the pride I felt when my son graduated, when my daughter left for her first job interview. Every ache, every sleepless night, every tear, none of it mattered then because they were worth it. And now? I asked myself, was all of that forgotten? Was a mother's love so easily replaced by convenience? By modern lives too busy to look back? The sound of children's laughter pulled me from my thoughts. 2 little girls ran past me, their braids bouncing, their arms clutching their father's hands. I smiled faintly, though pain stirred inside me. My own granddaughter should have been by my side, asking me for stories, tugging at my sari, wrapping her small arms around my neck. I knitted her a sweater with trembling fingers, each stitched woven with love. It still lay folded in my suitcase, untouched, unwanted. A vendor walked by, selling flowers. The fragrance of jasmine and roses filled the air, and I thought of my husband again. Every Friday, he used to bring me flowers, setting them in a glass jar on the windowsill. "For you, my Seraphina," he would say, his eyes twinkling as though I were the only woman in the world. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. But when I opened them,
The emptiness of the bench beside me was unbearable. I whispered to him, though he was long gone, "If you were here, I wouldn't be sitting alone. If you were here, they wouldn't have dared to abandon me." The station grew noisy again with another arrival. I sat up straight, heart pounding. My eyes scanned every face, every figure stepping off the train. For a moment, I thought I saw my son, a tall man with familiar shoulders. My breath caught in my throat. I rose quickly, waving my hand, but when he turned, it was not him, just another stranger, another cruel trick of longing. I sank back onto the bench, my chest aching from the false hope. That night, as the cold deepened, I began to talk softly to myself. Perhaps it was madness, or perhaps it was the only way to keep from breaking apart. I spoke to the empty bench as though it were my children sitting beside me. "Do you remember, my son, when you used to bring me wildflowers, calling me your best friend? Do you remember, my daughter, how you used to sleep on my lap, asking me to sing you lullabies?" My voice trembled, but I continued, because the silence was worse than the sound of my own breaking heart. The guard passed by again, his eyes kind but heavy with pity. He didn't ask me this time if my family was coming. Perhaps he already knew the answer. He only nodded, as in to say he understood, and kept walking. I leaned against my suitcase, exhaustion pulling at my bones. I told myself again, tomorrow. Tomorrow they will come. But as sleep finally claimed me, a different thought crept into my dreams. What if tomorrow never comes? What if I am already forgotten? And for the first time, I began to wonder if my waiting was not for them anymore, but for the end of my own story.
The morning of the fourth day rose gray and heavy. A thin mist rolled across the platform, swallowing the tracks and softening the edges of everything. I woke stiff and sore on the bench, my shawl damp with dew. My suitcase sat faithfully at my feet, the last companion of a woman who had once been surrounded by family, laughter, and noise. As I sat up slowly, my fingers brushing the cold wood, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't hope anymore, not the fragile hope that had kept me upright for 3 days and nights. It was something quieter. Acceptance, perhaps. Or surrender. I opened my handbag and took out the letter I had written for my son. The paper was creased from being folded and unfolded so many times, the ink smudged where my tears had fallen. I read it again, though I could recite it by heart. "My dearest child, if you read this, know that I loved you more than my own life. Every choice I made, every sacrifice was for you. I never expected riches, only your love. But love, once given, can be forgotten. I'm tired now, tired of waiting, tired of hoping, but even so, my prayers for you will never stop. Mama." I folded the letter and tucked it back into my bag. It was all I had left of the voice inside me that still called out to them. The station bustled as usual. People hurried past. Children laughed. Lovers whispered promises. Life went on, indifferent to the old woman sitting alone on a bench. I watched them all, but I felt as though I had stepped outside of the world, into a place where time no longer mattered. Memories washed over me like a tide. My son as a boy, clutching my sari at the market. My daughter with ink-stained fingers, writing her first poem at the kitchen table. My husband's voice, deep and warm, telling me we would grow old together. All of it flickered before me like film on an old projector, colors fading at the edges. A train pulled in with a long sigh, and people spilled onto the platform. I didn't lift my head this time. I didn't search their faces. Something in me had gone still, like a candle burned down to its last flame. A little girl broke away from her mother and came to stand in front of me. "Grandma," she said softly, "why are you sitting here alone?" Her mother hurried over, embarrassed. "Come away, child. Don't bother the lady."
But the girl lingered a moment longer, her big eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Concern. Simple and untainted. "Are you waiting for someone?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. I only nodded and managed a faint smile. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of candy. "Here," she said, placing it in my hand. "So you're not lonely." By the time I blinked away the tears, she was gone, swallowed up by the crowd. I held the candy in my palm like it was a jewel. Such a small gesture, but it pierced through the loneliness like sunlight through a cloud. And for a moment, I understood something. Love doesn't always return from the place you send it. Sometimes it arrives from a stranger, a child, a moment you never expected. The day wore on. Evenings settled in. The trains kept coming and going. I stayed seated, my hands folded over my cane, my suitcase at my feet. As night fell, I closed my eyes. My breath was steady, my heart slower now. In the darkness behind my lids, I saw my husband waiting at the end of a platform bathed in golden light. He reached out his hand to me, smiling. I whispered softly, not to anyone around me, but to the air itself. I waited at the train station, but my family never returned. Still, I loved them. Still, I forgive them. And with that, a kind of peace I had never known settled over me. When the guard walked by later, he found the old woman on the bench, her shawl wrapped tightly, a faint smile on her lips, a piece of candy still resting in her hand. The suitcase at her feet was light, but her story was heavy, with love, sacrifice, and waiting. The platform grew silent again, but the echo of her waiting remained, like a prayer lingering in the air.